Hey, hi everyone, this is Conor, and today I'm joined by my colleague Ross Moorhead, our expert in Microsoft 365 management. In this video, we're going to dive into some of the most commonly asked questions we get when we're presenting our SharePoint archiving solution to customers. Now, the first question we always get asked is, what does the file look like to the end user of a system when it's archived?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, great. So what you're looking at here is our SharePoint Online demo environment, basically. So we have a archive site that we've created that has a mix of documentation, imagery, videos, all of the typical formats that you would expect within a SharePoint environment. So if I actually click into the document library, you can see we've got these different folders here that has all of the different content in. So if I click into one of these folders, you can see we've got 3 PDF files, and notice that the file sizes are 1 meg here, 638 KB here. And then at the bottom, we've got 3 different looking documents. Now you'll see at the end that it has .docx and .url. So these are basically files that have been archived by our platform, and you can see the actual size of the files are reduced drastically. So they're 609 bytes in this instance. Now this specific document is actually a PDF, so you can see that here in the name of the title. But when I actually click on it as an end user, what's going to happen is it's going to take them to recenter. And it gives them the ability to actually restore documents directly from SharePoint. So when I click on this restore button, I get an option of restoring it to the original location in SharePoint, or I can actually restore it back to a different location if I wanted to. Typically, most users put it back to where it was before. And when they click that, what's going to happen is they're going to get a status bar that shows up here. And then when it's finished, it will get to 100%, and it will actually tell the user that this document has now been restored. And basically what will happen is this HTML link here will actually revert back to the original PDF file. So it will have the PDF icon, and the user can then go and use the document as they were before. It allows end users to actually get the document that they need, restore it very quickly, but it also allows organizations to take control of their SharePoint environment from a size perspective, because a lot of organizations that we speak to, they're using SharePoint Online as their kind of document library system, and they're actually burning through their allotted allowance from Microsoft and having to pay for premium storage. So by using an archiving platform, it allows you to actually take control of your environment from a storage perspective, actually archive off documents so that end users can still access them. They can still see them in SharePoint in their original location, but you're actually reducing your overall storage footprint and obviously saving on those Microsoft costs. So that's a typical user experience from a sort of archive and restore perspective. There is also an end user restore portal as well that allows you to search for documents that have been archived, but we can come on to that later on. But that's a sort of typical example. Does that answer the question, Conor?
Yeah, definitely. That's great. And it's a question that comes up a lot in demo, because people want to know that there isn't going to be a big impact on the end user experience when it comes to getting the files back from the archive. I think the next question that we should look at is the process for applying archive policies. So how do you determine the criteria by which files are archived?
Okay, yeah. So typically, certainly from Essentials perspective, what we do is we deliver a planning workshop at the start of the kind of onboarding process, and we look to discuss with your team as to what you're looking to achieve, what's the success criteria for putting an archive platform in place, and that will obviously fall around what archiving rules do you want to set up to actually start to save on that storage capacity. So typically that revolves around if a document is older than maybe 1 or 2 years, okay, that document can be archived off. It might be that you want to do it based on size. So if a document exceeds 1 megabyte, for example, then archive that document off. So there's a lot of granularity that you can go to when it comes to rules. And if I just move to a different screen and actually go into the rules section here. So what you can basically create is a default rule container, and within that rule container you can then set up your own rules. So as you can see here on the screen, we've got 4 different rules set up. Now you can have as many rules as you like, and you can also, like I said a minute ago, be as granular as you like. So you could apply rules to an entire SharePoint Online site collection, or you could actually go down to a folder level and apply that rule so it's specific to that folder. And we've done that in our demo system where we've actually got rules that cover the entire site, but also rules for specific folders. And it is very simple to create. So you can go into here, you can create a rule. So I'll call it test rule number 2 for today's session. I'm going to choose the storage optimization. From an object level perspective, there is different options, as you can see here, but we're going to focus on documents or emails. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to choose my content source, which in this case is SharePoint Online. When I click next, you then have the ability to create your rule. So as you can see here, some default templates pop up. So for this one, it's using document size as 1 megabyte. But again, as you can see here, there's lots of different options. A common one that we kind of see with our customers is actually to use last access time or modified time, because organizations want to capture documents that aren't being used readily. So, typically we would talk this through, understand what you're trying to achieve, and actually then recommend rules. But like I said, last access time / modified time is a common one that we would use. And once you click on it, you can actually define, what you want to do. So typically it would be older than, and you can choose a number of days. You can do weeks, months, and years. So it might be that you want to do 1 year, 2 year. So if I put 1 year in there, for example, it's going to scan through your SharePoint Online environment. It's going to identify any documents that meet that criteria, and then it's going to archive the content to your chosen storage container, which typically is Microsoft Azure Blob Storage, but there are options to use other types of storage containers as well, such as Amazon and others as well. Now, once you've defined your rules, what you can then do is you can then choose what the the action is going to be from an end user perspective. So we can then define here that we want to archive and remove that content. We want to leave a stub in place for each document, and then you can choose the type of stub that you want to leave. Now, what I showed you earlier on are the restore links, which allow users to actually restore the document directly from there and put it back into SharePoint. There are other stub options as well, but we'll come on to that in another video. So once you've defined all of the actions, again, you can choose your storage location. You do have the option to store data to the archive tier, which is actually the lowest cost tier for Microsoft Azure. We typically recommend that for older documents. Perhaps if you have a policy for older than maybe 3 years or 5 years, store that in the archive tier because it's less likely to be accessed, because the archive tier does take a little bit longer to actually restore. So once you've gone through all of that, you click save. Once you've saved the rule, what you can then do is you can then go into SharePoint Online. You can click onto here, click onto your different sites, and then once you find your site that you want to do, so this, for example, is our archive site that I mentioned, you can then apply that rule to that archive site, and then it will scan, find the documentation, and apply the rule. You can actually drill down further into here as well. So I could drill down into here and find the folder level as well if I wanted to. So as you can see, as you go through, you can actually get down to the folder levels. So in our demo environment, we've actually applied a separate rule for this HTML stub restore document. As you can see here, that's what that blue icon means, is that there's a separate rule that's been applied here. But in general, our recommendation is to always apply archive rules as high up as you can, because then managing it becomes a lot easier. But yeah, that's basically how you create a rule and how you would apply the rule to SharePoint Online.
Great. I think that shows the ease of use for the end user as well as the admin when it comes to creating policies. And as you said earlier, we'd work with you on implementation to get these rules set up the way that you want them to work. Another question that comes up quite a lot is how our solution compares to Microsoft's SharePoint archiving solution. Could you touch a little bit on that, please, Ross?
Yeah, sure. So it's a common question that we always get asked whenever we're speaking to any of our customers. And Microsoft is improving their offerings when it comes to the backup and the archive solutions that they have available. And as they improve it, things will change. But right now, one of the benefits that we see in our solution versus Microsoft is the ability to be granular. So having that ability to actually go down to specific site collections in SharePoint, being able to go down to a folder level, for example, and actually apply an archive policy at folder level. Now, when you compare that to Microsoft at the moment, what they're offering is a site level archiving function. So that's where you would apply an overriding rule to your SharePoint environment at the top level, and then that would then filter down into it. So if, for example, you wanted to archive documents that were a year or older, for example, it would apply it from the top level down. It would find every document that's a year and above. It would archive that file into your Azure Blob container, and it will actually remove the content from SharePoint Online, but it doesn't actually leave any sort of stub, as we call it, or any sort of link for the end user to actually find that document. So from an end user experience, users can't find documentation in SharePoint because it's been archived away by the Microsoft archiving solution, which then means they have to contact your IT team. The IT team will then have to go and search for that file within the Microsoft archiving solution and then restore it back into SharePoint for that user to then access. So if you imagine, certainly in a larger organization, the amount of requests that you might get to access documentation, your IT team is going to be quickly overcome with all of these different requests, and the turnaround time on actually restoring those documents is going to take a long time, because you're going to have to get through all of those requests. You're going to probably have to almost deploy a dedicated team to just managing those archiving requests from end users. Whereas with our solution, as we've shown here in the video so far, you can actually apply archive rules to as low down as you like. You could do it even at a document level if you wanted to. And then once you've applied those rules, from an end user experience, if I go back to the SharePoint environment, users can go to a document library, they can go in there, they can see the documentation that's available, they can click on that document, they can restore it back in their own time. The document's going to come back, they can use the document, and then when it then hits the archiving policy again, it will then get re-archived. So it just provides that sort of a much more smooth end user experience, and typically from a cost perspective, certainly in comparison to the SharePoint Premium storage, we typically see at least anywhere between 60 to 80% saving on the Microsoft Premium storage. The archiving costs vary depending on the organization, but we're typically cheaper than the Microsoft Archive solution as well. So you're getting a better user experience, you have more granularity and more control within your environment, and at a lower cost. So that's typically what we see when we're discussing with customers. Like I said, Microsoft are always improving their offerings, so we'll definitely keep an eye on how it changes over time. But right now, it's a compelling story in terms of what we can provide versus the Microsoft solution.
That's great. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Ross, and thank you guys for watching the video. Hopefully we've answered some of the questions that you might have about SharePoint archiving. If you'd like to find out more, you can book a call with myself and Ross, and we'll be happy to show you the ins and outs of the system.